Hey, it's me, Maggie J. Today with a review of episodes 3 and 4 of Reservation Dogs, called Uncle Brownie and...
What about your dad?
In my last Reservation Dogs video, I said I was going to want some answers pretty soon here, and holy cow did we get a lot of answers in this episode. I'm going to try not to cry during this, so it might take me an hour to film this. We'll see how it goes. We start off with an older couple driving down the highway. They pass a road sign that says something about Oklahoma that has been spray painted with the phrase land back across it. It sparks a conversation between these two about what it could mean. It couldn't possibly mean all of it, right? He spouts off a couple other silly stereotypes about natives. The passenger lady gets frustrated with her husband's cultural insensitivity and calls him a shit ass. And then they hit a deer. That deer winds up in Alora's trunk because 3/4 of the dogs rolled up on this roadkill, and Bear suggested they make backstrap with it. I had to look up what this was because I'm not a hunter, nor do I have the privilege of hanging out with anybody who goes hunting on a regular basis. Backstrap is the most tender cut of meat, like filet mignon of deer, if you will. Picking up the deer was not their purpose of the drive today. They're actually looking for Alora's Uncle Brownie, who once beat up 10 guys in less than 2 minutes down at the bar. So they want to get some fighting lessons from him. Also, Willie Jack wants him to put a curse on their enemies, and she's got the hair to do it, if that's what it takes. Side note, I realize I have been calling her Willie Jean and Willie Jack, but her name is actually Willie Jack, and I'm gonna do my best to make sure I call her just that. When they see a sign that says, "Stay out, fuckers," Alora knows they found the right spot. They walk up towards the house and are completely weirded out by an owl statue he has on his front porch. Because in this area of Indian territory, owls are bad luck, and it's not a good idea to look at them. So they all shield their eyes away from it, and as a nod of acknowledgement to this belief, the eyes of the owl are censored in the video. They find Uncle Brownie digging a bunch of holes in his yard. Alora has to remind him of who she is. She says she's Cookie's daughter, which makes him smile, but he makes it clear he does not want them here. After a literal spitting match with Willie Jack, the kids turn like they're gonna go ahead and leave. Uncle Brownie digs up an old jar of weed. Now, let me tell you about some things we learned about Uncle Brownie over the next couple of minutes. He grew up with his cousin, Alora's mother, whose name is Cookie.
Making them Cookie and Brownie, which is so cute.
They both lived with their grandma for a while, so they grew up kind of more like siblings than cousins, like so many of us cousins are. He lives kind of in the woods, away from where anybody else could possibly bother him, and according to him, he tries to live off the land as much as possible. But as Willie Jack points out, he's got a lot of cups from Sonic hanging around his house. He finds it offensive that Willie Jack thinks he's a shapeshifter. He doesn't want to smoke that government weed, and he only goes to town to borrow flour from his cousin Frank. He has to correct their story, though. He tells them he knocked out 20 people, plus a cop, in less than 2 minutes down at the bar. So his legend is even greater than we thought it was. This has got to be good news for the dogs. He'll be full of fighting lessons, right? Well, Uncle Brownie is proud of his accomplishments, but he's not too keen on passing down these lessons. Because all his fighting in town led to him being the kind of person who lives out in the woods, burying weed in jars and keeping everyone at a 2 arms length distance. The dogs agree to leave then, since he won't be teaching them anything. On the way out, Alora sees a photo of Brownie and her mother that she's never seen before. And we learn that Cookie died when Alora was 3. So she's got nothing but stories of her mother. She asks if Brownie could tell her some, and he says no. Not because he doesn't want to, but because he'll cry. Which is such an old man response. Stop being stingy with your stories. Tears or not, you've got to tell these stories, because that's all that some people get to have. Alora doesn't really know how to take this news, so she just says, "Bye, Uncle." Before they can get all the way to the car, Brownie comes rushing out with a bag over his shoulder. He agrees to teach them some fighting, but they've got to take him to town so he can sell his weed. And they have to pay him $30 for his lessons. Alora takes this deal immediately, but before they can get into the car, Brownie notices the deer in the trunk that Bear says has gotten bigger since they put it in there, which we all know means they've got a rotten deer in the trunk. Brownie says they can't dump it on his land, so they have to leave it in the trunk and head on into town. Brownie's first lesson to them is that weed is the creator's medicine, and to stay away from alcohol. Just smoke, he says, but he won't share his stash with them. They're too young to smoke. The first stop Brownie makes is at a house with two young men sitting in the driveway. He approaches with his jar of weed so they can smell it. They only fucks with OG Boogeyman strain though, so there's no sale at this stop. Brownie's next fighting lessons include always be ready, strike first, and aim for the back of the head when you punch someone in the face. That's how you knock them out. These sound a lot like the tenants from Cobra Kai too, but that's a whole nother set of reviews. I'm not sure if this scene was well rehearsed or if it was a little bit more improv, because I don't think Bear was supposed to stumble that far out of frame, but it felt very authentic and I really like the shot. The second place Uncle Brownie tries to sell is at the car wash, where the guys there tell him they don't want any of his ditch weed. He's starting to get a bit frustrated now. How come nobody will buy his homegrown? Willie Jack suggests they go to the dispensary. Maybe they'll want to buy some dusty old weeds. The technician at the dispensary tries a sample of Uncle's old weed, but it's way too harsh to sell. He lets Uncle Brownie try a sample of some new weed, and Uncle is fucked up. While he's happy and high, Willie Jack asks if he can curse someone, which he says he can, but he doesn't want to, because bad medicine like that can turn around on you tenfold. So she's disappointed that he won't do it, and that he basically called her crazy for gathering up hair to do a curse on. During a stop at Sonic's, Uncle Brownie discusses what it takes to be a warrior, that you can't learn it from a book or from having a discussion. It's a process that you have to live, and with experience, they'll become better warriors. This does not make Bear or Willie Jack happy, but all through this episode, you can see Allura is loving having her uncle around and listening to all of his lessons. She looks at him with a lot of admiration and curiosity, whether because of his closeness to her mother, or maybe because she doesn't have another older male figure in her life to teach her these lessons. This is an amazing job of showing us, rather than telling us, how she feels about him. And I feel I have to point out these things that are being done right, because I have been reviewing American Horror Stories lately, and holy shit, are those some terrible stories. There's one final stop that Brownie wants to hit, which seems a bit strange because he's accompanied by a bunch of teenagers. But he's pretty sure he can unload his weed here, so it makes sense to the plot. They stop by that bar where he knocked out the 20 people in 2 minutes, and I guess maybe he's not been back there since then because the patrons and the bartender are not happy to see him because of all the destruction he caused the last time. Willie Jack tries to confirm his story about knocking out 20 people, but the bartender corrects her and says no, it was actually 30 people and 2 cops, which is impressive to the dogs. But it turns out that Uncle Brownie had wound up snorting a line of meth offered to him by one of the people sitting at the bar, complaining about his behavior, so they kind of agree that it was both of their faults. To make it up to everyone in the bar, Brownie says that he will share his big jar of weed, and he'll buy $30 worth of drinks. And Allura says he's got some backstrap for them, which makes everyone cheer. So they head out to the car to do whatever to the deer, which leads us into the most disgusting shot of the series so far. While they're all tugging on a different leg of the deer to get it out of the trunk, something explodes and deer stuff squirts out of the carcass and lands mostly on Uncle Brownie's face. It's disgusting. Everyone is grossed out and gagging. And Allura is apologizing to Brownie for bothering him and making him leave the house and getting into this literal mess. But he stops her and he says he's glad he's had this day with them. That's real family, he says, and thanks her for coming by. And that's the end of the episode. Okay, wait, no, there was a scene during the credits of Willie Jack sitting at the bar looking at that Ziploc bag full of the hair of her enemies. One of the bar patrons asks what she's doing with it. So she tells him her uncle wouldn't put a curse on it for her. He says, let me see what I can do. And she's like, okay then. I wonder if we're going to find out the results of this sometime over the next 2 episodes. Not to spoil anything, but I've already watched the next episode. Nothing happens about it. I loved this episode. It was funny and touching and examined a situation that is all too familiar to those of us with families that are too large to keep the connection straight, and also families that are too small to have enough relations. So you have to find your own additional family members. Brownie is not Alora's uncle. He might be her cousin at best, but because of the respect for the relationship that he had with her mother, she calls him uncle. And by the end of the day, this day full of lessons from Brownie and lessons that the dogs also taught Brownie. When they go to the bar, he says, "I've got my nieces and nephew with me." And then Willie Jack calls him uncle. Now they're family for life and probably won't be able to tell their children when Uncle Brownie became their uncle. It's just the way that it is for so many families out there. The writer of the show really knows what they're doing. Again, I didn't delve too deeply into the dialogue because it is such a unique experience. It's something you really have to see for yourself. Overall, I give this episode 4, maybe 4.5 stars because it gave me more explanation than the other episodes have, and I definitely cried several more times in this one than I have in the other ones. The only thing that was missing here was cheese, which is something that my dad says a lot. Speaking of fathers, this next episode is called
What About Your Dad?
The episode opens with a music video from Pumpkin Lusty for his song Greasy Greasy Fry Bread. This is an ode to a long-standing staple in native diets for reasons that I won't get into in this video. And this song is something else. If you haven't guessed yet, this is Bear's father, the unemployed rapper mentioned a couple of episodes ago. At a staff meeting, Rita learns that Bear's father is scheduled to perform at the anti-diabetes wellness fair happening at the clinic. Because of the new song released, the clinic plans on making big old fry breads and handing them out during the wellness fair. Because, in case you didn't know, fried dough is the kryptonite to diabetes. And that is why natives are all so healthy. Anyway, Rita is freaking out. Not because she's excited to or even wants to see this fool, but because of what this could do to Bear. She's got the good and evil sides of her trying to influence her into being a real bitch or being more than civil for the sake of her son. It's a real struggle. By the way, kudos to whoever is making the earrings for the people on the show, because this is some really pretty work. I loved Willie Jack's earrings in the last episode, and these really long ones that Rita is wearing here are beautiful. Even these ones that Pumpkin is wearing are very cool, even though they're not beaded. So Rita calls Pumpkin, who has her saved as baby mama number 2, which is so respectful. And we see he's living the low-wage lifestyle out in California, despite continuing to act like someone whose rap career is soaring. She tells him he better show up because Bear will be expecting to see him. Pumpkin asks if he can sleep on her couch while he's in town. In honor of his father coming to visit, Bear and the rest of the dogs are stocking up on food and such, dipping into the California fund for their expenses. While they're at the grocery store, they split up and each grab something different. Alora is looking for paper plates and such and runs into Jackie, the Indian mafia chick. Completely unprompted, Jackie tells Alora she knows they're saving money to go to California, but Alora is the only one who's serious about that plan. So when she wants to stop wasting her time with them, meaning the dogs, Jackie could let her into the mafia. To what ends is unclear. She doesn't say Alora could join them to make more money quicker, or to join their plans they have of going to California. I guess she would just have a different friend group who are more serious about doing the things they say they're gonna do. This scene sets a tone for the rest of the episode that I do not like. And I'm not sure it exactly fits into the narrative. Like Alora says, you just jumped my friend. Why would I want to join you? There's not been any atonement made by Jackie, and there's not really been any interactions between them. No moment where they realize they're two sides of the same coin, or both of them are into pantomime, or that they both really enjoy putting M&Ms into their popcorn, which makes them the weirdo in their friend group. There is nothing bringing them closer together that would spark this kind of invitation, except Jackie knows where the plastic spoons are when Alora's looking for them. I think that this could have happened later, perhaps in a whole different context, and it might have been a more natural reveal, but I'm getting ahead of the plot, so I'll come back to this at the end. In the checkout line, Elora reaches into their envelope of money that they've been saving to go to California. She pulls out money for groceries and for a Godzilla movie, which is something that Bear and his father often watch. Then he starts talking about wanting to buy his dad a gift. So she pulls out $40 more and says, only because it's your dad. Bear decides to get his dad a beaded medallion, but the only person that they know who beads is Willie Jack's crazy Aunt Bee. Despite having a wall full of medallions already made, she keeps saying that the only one that she has is, depicts a pickle. Bear doesn't think that that's quite gangster enough and asks if she can make a microphone by tomorrow. She says, of course, but it's going to be $90 for the rush job. Elora says, nah, forget it. It's not worth it. But Bear insists and says he'll be back tomorrow with the $90. While they walk home, Elora lets him know she is not happy about him spending the extra money on this medallion. He says they'll make it back. They can sell onions and such. They're interrupted by Mose and Miko with another update on the Indian mafia situation. Apparently, they've been talking shit about Bear's dad's rapping. But Mose and Miko say he's the native Jay-Z, which makes Rita Beyonce. If this were an anime, these guys would get a nosebleed right about now because they think Rita is so fine. They ride away before the mafia can drive by and tell Bear his dad ain't shit. Willie Jack throws her shoe at their car, and it sounds like it makes pretty good contact, but it's a slide, so likely no damage is done. That night, Rita tries to talk to Bear to prep him for the possibility of his father not showing up. But he doesn't want to hear that. Besides, he's not coming here to see Bear. He's coming for a gig. Bear knows he'd never miss a gig, which is so sad and yet utterly optimistic. This poor boy. Rita takes herself out for the night, looking for something to make her feel better. And she meets a guy who seems too good to be true. He's good looking, very polite, apparently charming enough to get her to go home with him that night. And he winds up being a very rich and charitable doctor guy. Starts to get a little excited. Could she have possibly found someone worth pursuing? Well, he's got a Confederate flag tattoo on his arm with feathers on it that he says is because he's a big Skinnerd fan. And the feathers are because he loves Indians as well. And it only gets better from there. He says his property used to be Indian land, but his grandfather bought it, honestly. And he was such a good guy. He let the Creek man that he bought it from go ahead and continue living on the property, but you know, far enough away that you didn't have to look at him. He's always been attractive to Native women more than any other race. His best friend is Lakota. Luckily, Rita already had her shoes on, otherwise she would have ran out of this man's house barefoot, which probably would have only spawned more fantasies from this native fetishist. At least she found out right away. There's nothing worse than wasting a couple of weeks finding out somebody's a fucking loser. Auntie B has finished Bear's medallion. It doesn't look like the way he imagined it would, though. But he pays her the money, because you don't stiff an artist who's made you a custom piece. Elora is not happy about this $90 expense that looks like a dick and balls. She's even further upset when she finds out later on that Bear bought himself a new jumpsuit to wear to his father's performance. Cheese and Willie Jack thinks he looks great and don't seem to mind the money he's spending, but this is beyond Elora's limit. She tells him to stop spending her money. It's not just hers, he reminds her, but you can tell she's been considering it her money to get her to California, which again makes me wonder, what is driving her away from here so fiercely? Something's not right here. Rita comes home during all this, which puts an end to the disagreement, but then her phone rings, so she goes right back outside to talk to Pumpkin. He's still in California and says his flight leaves in the morning, and he can't wait to see Bear. He's even got something for him. Oh, and by the way, how old is Bear now? In his defense, she is baby mama number 2, so maybe Pumpkin just doesn't know which kid he's going to visit. Allura comes outside a few minutes later. She and Rita exchange a few lines about how you can't force people to participate, and that it's up to them, the women, to hold it together and make it all work. They're both talking about wildly different situations, but the words work for both of them. The next day is the concert. Bear and Rita pull up to the clinic. He's wearing his new outfit. He's got his necklace on. He is so excited.
Then his dad calls, and we can see him just
Wandering around inside his apartment, but he tells Bear they've canceled his flight at the airport. And the private jet is all booked up, so he won't be able to make it today. But like maybe in a week he could come and visit, you know. We can see the tears in Bear's eyes as he hangs up. Rita does her best to comfort him, saying she will cut Pumpkin out of their lives for good if he wants her to. But he doesn't give her an answer. They go home, and later that night, the dogs and Rita are all watching Godzilla. Allura looks around the room and sees all the stuff they wasted their money on for an event that never wound up happening. She cuts out early and conveniently gets a text from Jackie a minute later. We don't see if she responds, she just walks off into the night. And that's the end of the episode. I knew this show was going to make me cry, and it has. A little bit more in each of the last 3 episodes now. Maybe because the story is so familiar, or maybe because it's just so believable. But whatever it is, this show is incredible. Overall, I give this episode 3 stars. It was a bit tough to watch, as I imagine it would be for anyone who understands this pain. The dad figure is so much cringe. There is nothing likable about him. But I want him to be there for his son. I even thought that he would, because of the gig. Bear said he'd never miss a gig, and I believe that about certain artists, which is why he put so much faith into him showing up. So watching Bear's heart break was difficult. The whole storyline about Elena and the money, I really did not care for. Like, I could feel that it was coming, but that Jackie is the one that kind of got her thinking that her current friends are not the ones that she needs. I don't like it. As I was saying before about the timing of that scene, I don't think it works logically. Or maybe I just don't rather it to work. I would have rather have Elena come to the conclusion that she's only being serious about California on her own, which feels like that would have happened naturally because Bear was spending a lot of money without discussing it, and Willie, Jack, and Cheese are not in the least concerned with the total. Her freaking out about the money naturally fit right into the storyline. We didn't need Jackie to bring up that her friends aren't serious about California. If Allura and Jackie are meant to become friends to the point Allura would need to choose between the mafia and the dogs, we need to see what turns Jackie from someone in charge of a rival gang who's attacked the dogs twice, almost 3 times, to someone that Allura connects with on a level that her lifelong friends cannot reach. The supermarket scene also feels like an afterthought, jammed into this episode in the only scene where Allura could have possibly been approached by somebody in the mafia. Everything else has been introduced with grace at an expected time. This does not fit in with the rest of the writing that has happened in this series. What is it called when you really enjoyed watching something but didn't like hardly anything that happened? Because that's what I'm feeling a lot right now. I didn't hate this episode. I totally enjoyed watching it. I just didn't like what happened. I'm not disappointed or anything. Like, I knew all of these situations were coming. I knew that Bear's father was going to be a scumbag. I knew that Bear would have his heart broken by him. I knew Elena and the money would become an issue. I could see all of this coming. I didn't expect that Elena would be thinking about making friends with dumb Jackie, of all people. Or that the IHS would be paying for a guest appearance by a deadbeat with a fry bread song at an anti-diabetes health rally. So I'm definitely surprised by some of these events. Rita is the hero of this episode though. She has to be the rock for her son, and for herself. It's got to be lonely for her because she doesn't seem like she has much of a support system. And as much as Bear tries to make it easier on her by slipping money into her wallet and not getting too upset with her when she goes out all the time, it's got to be exhausting to be an only parent. Rita deserves an all-inclusive getaway. Maybe she'll meet a self-sufficient guy who's not a racist. That is all that I have to say about this. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. It would really help me grow according to some articles that I've been reading. I will have more content up soon. I just can't guarantee when. So I hope that you check back soon. And until then, y'all stay safe out there.